Hi there, good morning. I'm Dr. Zimmerman. This is a little impromptu fasting space that I'm hosting, a little Ask Me Anything, and happy to have you join in the chat. Mm, I answer questions about all kinds of things. My simple fasting channel, my medical practice. If you're connected to the channel already, happy to hear any feedback or questions. If you're new, just scrolling in, maybe you saw a thumbnail. Feel free to say hi in the chat. Where are you coming from? And happy to have a little chat about anything in particular. If you see the little scrolling banner, I got a little project I've been working on. Happy to tell you about if you have interest. A little fasting charity project. I'm giving a little shot at raising some money for food insecure families in a food pantry that I'm running. And to me, this is a project I'm very interested in. Very interested in fasting, helping people lose weight, reverse type 2 diabetes. This is what I do professionally. And then in my free time, I do some volunteering with this, see the other side of it. People who are kind of just hanging on and trying to get enough food to feed their families. I'm trying to bridge those gaps. So one of the things I'm doing today. So on Sunday mornings, I've been hosting a live stream over the last couple months. It's very scripted. And I've been, speaking for 20, 30 minutes on a topic, which I'm going to keep doing. Certainly swing back for that. That's more structured. I just had an idea. Just open up some space and see, does anyone come? Is it a benefit? Be it just interesting to meet some people, chat. So that's kind of the thought of this. Let me know if you think that's a good idea. If you have feedback, what would an open live session look like that would be optimal in your opinion? I'm just grabbing a coffee. I'm learning this whole YouTube game. The live game is kind of interesting because it gives me a little counter when it says there's people hanging around. So how do you build something from scratch? That's kind of what I'm working on. I, of course, can envision a time where we have lots of people have a big chat, have a discussion. One of the main things I would really like to do in the long term, build a community, help people connect around health and wellness topics. That's what really gets me excited. In the future, especially Sunday mornings, I'm working on getting some guests. I would like to ultimately turn it into a little bit of, kind of an interview podcast style thing. So working on that. And yeah, there you go. Glasgow. How are you? I am. I'm gonna try one thing here. I've got a tool here where I can. Supposedly, I'm supposed to be able to bring it up on screen. There it is. I don't honestly know how I did it. There we go. Okay, it goes on and off. Hey, thanks for chatting in. So appreciate that. And thank you for sharing. Struggling with weight it can be such a frustrating experience. So I just want to validate that it really, part of it. I've been working on counseling for weight management, for about a decade. I've sat with so many people working on it. You tell me if this resonates with you or not, but one of the most frustrating things is like it's your body. You say, this is my body. Like, shouldn't we be able to control these things? And to not have control of it is perhaps one of the things that people find the most frustrating, to say, shouldn't I be able to decide what my own body is doing with this energy? And so this is one of the things that I try to help people do, is to say, there's a lot of perspective out there that, yeah, there's a lot of perspective that, okay, weight is genetic. This is something you hear so much, that you're just born in a certain way, your body is a certain way. Things are almost like predestined, And and I really dislike that. I mean, there is certainly truth to the idea, that we're all different. We certainly have a genetic makeup that determines some things. But the thing I really don't like about this perspective is it leaves people feeling helpless, like that nothing can change. Like if things are the way they are, that there's nothing can be done. And I really feel that that is far from the truth. So Our my one of my base opinions, or perspective is that most, weight issues are hormonal at their root. So, most of society has, spent a very long time just focused only on calories. How many calories are people getting? And we look at that and we say, "Losing weight is supposed to be easy." You just decrease the calories and then the weight will just, disappear. But anybody struggling with weight knows that things are much more complex than that. And so, fasting has a potential of hormonally changing things. And this is what people don't appreciate. It's very common when I talk to people about fasting. They say, oh, fasting only works because people are getting less calories. And and this is an argument that I never really care to have with people because on the one hand, I really don't care. Like I don't if something works, then it works. Fasting can change the hormones. Okay, before I launch into a big lecture on it, though, I say I inadvertently adopt new habits and struggle a lot. Help me understand if you want to have a little dialogue about it. What are the types of habits that have like you try to fast? Does it end up some people experience, oh, if I go through a fasting process, I'll end up, eating more later. Is it that type of thing, or are there other things that I am not keying in on? I would be happy to hear it. I found an interesting study once that was studying people that are fasting, and they definitely found, oh, I forgot the time frames. I'll have to look it up. But if you fast for a certain amount of time, the next meal that you eat, I mean, it almost always is bigger if people aren't planning for it. And so this is a known effect. But if you fasted, for example, during 50% of the time, and then ate 20% more, for example, at a certain meal, many people find that this shakes out okay in the long run. But there's all kinds of different struggles that can develop, and I'll give you some broad thoughts, and if you have more specific issue, I'm happy to give some thoughts on it. So in broad strokes, fasting to me should always be a positive, at least neutral. So I say neutral is okay, but should always have a positive mindset. I never want people to be stressed by any sort of fasting practice. If a fasting practice is driving someone to be in a worse mental state, then I would never have someone do it. And I say maybe it's something that you need to work toward. Maybe it's you need to spend some time in some other types of practices like around it. Fasting to me itself is a mental health practice. So many people have fasting incorporated in some sort of, spiritual or wellness tradition that is about disconnecting, cleansing, rejuvenating. These are the types of mindsets that I really want people to get in. If you're in a mindset where it is causing increased stress, where it says, oh, I feel so hungry, or I feel overwhelmed, or I feel unwell in any way, that is something that I would really encourage people to mitigate or stay away from in the biggest possible way. Yeah, after years of eating a certain way and at a certain time, it's difficult to break established habits. Absolutely, it so much is. So being unable to overcome those established normal fail. Yeah. So I totally, agree with this. So I did on the live stream I did last week, um, on the, marathon mindset, I chopped that up. I'm throwing it out tomorrow, as kind of a more focused version of that. I was talking with a client this last week where they said, I have so many what they were calling bad habits, eating frequently, snacking, all these things. They say I can only take tiny little steps forward and it feels like I'm moving so slowly. But in a situation like this, where you have all these established patterns, one strategy that I've used with people is to break it down and say, what is the tiniest step? Like when you tried to fast before, potentially it's like you say, okay, I'm normally eating like these times, and you just knock out a whole meal. And then that can be a shock to the system. And so, if you can do it, then of course I'm all for it. But if it feels like, oh, it's just not resonating, the other approach is to say, how can you break this down, think longer term, and then move it move that meal. Like if say just hypothetically you're having 3 meals and you're trying to go 2. Well, to get this meal just gone, you say, well, just getting rid of it too intense, can't stick with it, causing me stress. The other way to think of it is, can you move that meal closer to the other one slowly over time, and then eventually they merge. And so, for example, let's say breakfast is the time that we're trying to deal with, and you have a personal routine that is always like, oh, I eat my breakfast at 7, and then I eat my lunch at noon, and I just can't change this. So if it's 7, for example, what if it became 7:05 and we just open up 5 more minutes of this fasting space? And that's like day 1. That would be like the smallest potential increment. Probably it'd be much easier to do that, right? Than to just knock out the whole thing and add all these hours to a process. And so what if 5-minute increments was the thing, and you say, tomorrow I'm doing 7:05. If you feel fine, then go 7:10. Not everybody could do this with, a work or something. You have to, work with it. Couple days, 7:10, you say, okay, I'm getting used to that. Then 7:15, 7:20. What if by a couple weeks you push it out 7:30? And, depending on what, your lifestyle and demands and things are on your time, maybe you have to turn, breakfast or whatever that is, you bring some protein bar or something if you have to go to work or have to go something where you can sneak it in sometime. But this is when people really struggling to open up any fasting space and stick with it. This is usually the route I go, because people feel like, oh, I have to jump right into these things. Or you watch videos that are like 16:8 to say, oh, you have to hit all the way to 16 hours before you're doing anything. And that absolutely is not true. So 16:8, for example, is just a concept. It's an arbitrary number, and all the way in between, maybe 12 hours of fasting all the way out to 16, that's like a whole spectrum. And the more you go through that process, the stronger the effect is. And then you get to 16, of course, you could push beyond it. But think of it much more as a spectrum than as, oh, at 15 and a half hours, like nothing is happening. And once I hit 16, there's something magical. No, there's nothing about the exact amount of time. So I often tell people, what if it took 6 months to slowly march out that food-free space bigger? That would be no big deal. I mean, it's going to be 6 months from now, you know, 6 months from now, whether you are working slowly and methodically on a process or you aren't. So, and in the big picture of life, 6 months is not a big deal at all. I don't know if that resonates as a concept or if you've ever tried to do it, but I do like that. Slowly march out these little changes. Another thing is to not get too overwhelmed by failure. And I don't say I failed trying to fast before. I think failing is it's just too harsh of a word in my view. Like many people struggling with weight, it's so easy to be critical of ourselves. And I'm doing some writing now for a video I want to do in the next couple weeks that is thinking about, like, okay, if you were talking to a friend who was struggling, like, how would you interact with them? And they were saying, they were confiding in you, for example, say, you know what, I'm really having trouble with this issue. I'm trying to eat less. I just can't do it. You think about how you would treat them. You would be compassionate to them. You would tell them that it's okay, like you're doing your best. And I just think so often we don't treat ourselves with the grace and compassion that we would show to a good friend. And so I just think, like, can we be a friend to ourselves first? Can we, like, let ourselves know, like, hey, it's okay. This is actually really hard. It's an extremely hard thing to do. And you try it, and, like, every time you're trying something, if it's not working, okay, it's not a failure. It's like learning. That's what it is. It's just learning and gaining experience that you need in order to ultimately have success. And that's such a more thoughtful way to look at it for our own selves, and to try to not be so critical of ourselves and actually try to turn that around, give ourselves encouragement, and realize, hey, I got another rep in. Like, you think about someone's trying to get stronger, like physically, they might lift weights, and, like, they can't lift very much, but they start lifting little weights, and they say, oh, I'm not hitting my goal. I'm not lifting the weight I want, but they keep working at it. And eventually, like, you're getting stronger. So look at, all of us are going through a process. We all have the situation that we're in with the resources that we have, the experiences we have, and then we approach it and do our best. We're going through a process and learning and growing and developing. And so having it that way, I think, just be encouraging to yourself. I definitely am a believer that we have a lot of power in our thoughts and the way we think about it. And so if we're constantly, filling our thoughts with negative thinking, and it's like, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like, oh, I know I couldn't do it. I've tried this so many times, and it never worked. And, um, and isn't this what I knew would happen? And then we just beat ourselves up. And when we can run that whole process in reverse, we can say, look at this, like, I'm a strong and resourceful person, and I gave this my best shot. And then here is what I learned from it. Like, I learned, whatever it is that you learned. This is indeed a new way to look at it. Let's see. No, there we go. I'm impatient by nature. Psychologically, I'm driven by immediate results. Absolutely. Most people are. It's kind of the default state. Yeah, well, this is just the exact thing to dive into. I have many thoughts about this. So let's deal with the last part of it first. The slow pace of fasting opposed to pills. Okay. So I worked in a medical clinic for, you know, 12 to 15 years, depending on if you include my medical training. And I mean, I worked a lot with weight loss medications. And then for 3 years, I had a section of my clinic that was specifically a weight loss clinic. And so, the demand for medication is huge, and the advertising for medication is huge. And, um, you know, see my disclaimer in the box. I'm not giving anyone any medical advice or telling anyone what to do with medications or anything like that. But I just give you my broad reflections about my experience using medications for people. Is that medications for weight loss, um, the promise of them is so alluring and appealing. The marketing of them, at least here in the US, I mean, we've got commercials of beautiful people, perfectly lit and incredible results, and then they show all the clinical trials, and it's basically proven, and all you've gotta do is walk into your doctor's office and get the medication, and then, everything's gonna be great. And, I remember once when I was, early in my practice, you know, I I always have a goal of helping people to be as healthy as possible. And so you go to medical school, you learn every good thing, and you teach everybody, okay, you've got to exercise and portion control and eat the healthy foods. And you give every piece of standard advice in my practice. And I'll tell you, it's very rare that I would have any patient that came in where I tell people to do these things and they say, like, oh, you know what, my life has never been the same. I started exercising and then I lost all the weight and I'm perfectly healthy now. I mean, this is just not the type of thing that happens. So I was very discouraged. And so I went to a conference for the Mayo Clinic, paid all this money, went to this conference. It was like 4 days in San Francisco, and they got like 20 speakers. And I listened to all the speakers, and I like literally, I didn't learn anything. And so out at the out of the conference area are all the pharmaceutical representatives. So there's all these companies there, with their weight loss medicines. And most of these are versions of phentermine, there's all kinds of phentermine containing products, stimulants. And then, of course, we've got the GLP-1s and the Wegovy and Rybelsus and every injection version, Ozempic, and then all these other sort of things. And so I was sitting there at the conference. I was like, maybe these people are right. Like maybe I'm too cynical. I need to really give it. I'm a internal medicine physician. I practice medicine. I just need to use the medicines. And I went all in for a period of time, just really medically manage people with these medicines. And I'll just tell you, I gave it every good shot that I have, and I was completely unimpressed. I'll just tell you, I was completely unimpressed with the results in the long term. I mean, so if you take someone and you put them on a weight loss medication, like just take a phentermine one, and whether it's phentermine with bupropion or phentermine with all the other things they mix it with, naltrexone now, or yeah, everybody feels better, right? People come back in 1 month, people are feeling better. They're kind of jazzed up on the stimulants. I don't know if you've ever taken it, people feeling good. They are appetite suppressants, and almost everybody loses weight in the short term. And so, like, that's the first part of the question. How do you deal with a slow pace of fasting as opposed to pills? Pills give you a super boost in the short term. My experience, though, is that is not a durable effect. And the real question is, where do people get, 2 years out, in my view? And because it's going to be 2 years, whether you're taking pills or you're not taking 2 years, or you're not taking pills or injections or any of these sort of things. And people have side effects from medications. This is the thing. People have a lot of side effects from stimulants. They can be disruptive of sleep. Uh, they can increase anxiety. And these are effects that can build. And I've seen that build for people where, everything was so good and the patient is giving you a hug on the way into the clinic at the first visit. But by the fifth visit, it's kind of like, everything kind of, the weight really came down, but then it's okay. Now it's plateau. And now we're kind of sitting here. And if you look even at the clinical studies from the pharmaceutical companies, you know, at best, these things are in the 5 to 10% total weight reduction, and then you just have to stay on them to try to maintain them. And so in my view, these and the same thing is basically true for GLP-1s, which I do think they have a role. Like, it's not that I would say, "Oh, someone should never ever use any sort of medicine under any circumstance." It's just in my perspective, they aren't the life-changing, incredible long-term products that people hope that they are. And my perspective is that learning how to practice a fasting is much more like what people think a pill can do. And I'm not saying that it's easy to learn how to do that, but if you approach it, see, most people approach a fasting practice in a very aggressive sort of fashion. And there's this thought, and which is partially true, right? That fasting is very aggressive. It's very intense thing to do. But okay, true, but like if we approach it like I was explaining before, in a much slower, much more thoughtful way, then it can become less intense. You can dose much smaller amounts of it, train the body how to do it over time, and you can get much better effects than I've ever seen with medicine for much less cost, nothing, and much lower risk, also practically nothing. Uh, with the disclaimer that if you take medicines for medical conditions, obviously talk with a medical provider about it. And especially for type 2 diabetes, you start fasting. You don't want your blood sugar to drop too low, for example. If you're taking blood pressure medicines, fasting can also lower blood pressure. And so if you are lowering your blood pressure and taking blood pressure medicines, of course, could you feel dizzy? Could you feel lightheaded? Could you pass out? Of course you could. That's why I tell everybody disclaimers, talk with a medical, provider if you take any medication, have any medical condition. But those effects, blood sugar lowering, blood pressure lowering, just showing you like what the potential is with fasting. Like people think, oh, I need a medicine, a pill to lower my blood pressure, lower my blood sugar, lose weight. Well, actually a fasting practice can do that. And so approach it in a very calm and thoughtful way and teach yourself how to do it. The body, I basically believe every human being is capable of learning how to do it if we provide the structure and the thoughtful way that we can go about doing it. And so that's what I'm trying to build on the channel is like materials and content to help people decrease the intensity and pressure so that they can ease, into it. Okay, so those are some thoughts about pills. Let me know if that communicates perspectives. Okay, then the first part of it, I'm impatient by nature, so psychologically I'm driven by immediate results. Okay, I'm going to reload a coffee and then let's do some thinking. Okay, my first thought, this is really good insight. A lot of people don't have insight into why they think the way they do. And so just off the bat, recognizing, hey, I'm impatient and I'm just really short-term focused. This is like the first step of of moving toward it and changing it ultimately, just to recognize it. So I'm personally, I'm very big on journaling. Um, I mean, personally, my my life started to improve when I finally started keeping a personal journal and writing down insights like this. I had counselors and friends and thoughtful people telling me, you should just really like start a journal. And then as I did that, I started working with patients much more on helping them just to journal. And journals can take many different forms. For example, a simple type of journal that is, weight loss related, might just be writing down the food that you're eating just so that you can create a record of it and see it, because it's almost impossible to remember more than a few days back exactly what we ate. And so if we're trying to create a longer term view, a bigger picture, and okay, like let's say you had a certain weight and then a month later it didn't change. And you were like, okay, what do I do now? Like if you want the next month to be different than this month, like something would have to change. And if you don't have any record of it, then you're just in this abstract zone. It's like, well, I kind of, eat this for breakfast usually and this for lunch and this for dinner. But if you like wrote it down, then you would know. And especially if you're trying to do this timing thing that I outlined, where you could say like, um, here I can see a month ago I was eating the breakfast, at 7, and like now I've march it out to 7:30, and then you can see what the effect is, and, like, it can really help, and so I really almost never, advise people to do calorie counting. It's just so much math. It just makes so much difficulty. There's only specific scenarios where I ever find that helpful. But just big picture, this morning I had, 2 eggs and a avocado toast, and you just put it there or whatever it is. And and then you just have that record, and maybe you put what time it was if you're trying to do that. And uh that practice would be like a simple food journal that could facilitate this sort of thing. Now, a journal can become much more complex than that, and more of a counseling sort of journal would be like an emotional sort of journal. And of course, our emotions are so intimately connected with like our hunger and how we're eating. And so to try to tease that apart and understand why do I feel the way I do? Why am I doing what I do? This sort of thing, recognizing the impatience, that would be the type of thing I would tell someone to start writing out. Why exactly am I so impatient? Like what is driving it, And have I always been this way? Is there something uh that developed at some time for some reason? A journal like that is like becoming your own therapist, basically. If you went to a therapist and you said, "Hey, I'm like impulsive and all these sort of things," they would almost undoubtedly just start reflecting that back to you and asking you questions about it. And then that's basically what you're doing in a journal just for yourself. And that would be a way to start approaching it. I'm driven by immediate results. The other thing, there's another way to start practicing self compassion again, is that, I mean, we're pretty much all that way, like, at least some of the time. Immediate results, I mean, honestly, make a lot of sense, right? In most areas of life, like, having some immediate results is, like, a good thing, and, like, you don't wanna waste your time, and if you're, like, doing something and it's, like, never seeing results, like, we have these natural feedbacks where it's like, "Oh, that doesn't work," I shouldn't do it, and, that's true in certain types of things, but then it isn't true in situations where we have to accomplish some goal over a large period of time. And so that's how we have to change our focus, is to realize, all right, I'm not like an evolutionary biologist or anything like that. People evolved in a certain set of circumstances where we're focused on short-term survival, right? It's like we need to get food and keep ourselves alive, and like every that's a very short term sort of situation. And so here we are living in this golden age of food abundance, and now we have to think longer term, where we're not thinking about, like, hopefully, most of the time, like, where is my next meal coming from? We're saying, like, how do I improve my 10-year cardiovascular risk? I don't want to have a heart attack 10 years from now. I mean, there's a much more abstract sort of thing to work toward. How do I decrease the chance that I'm developing type 2 diabetes over the next 2 decades? Like, you have to have a longer term focus. And so there's like a lot of tension with some of our innate biological functioning that is very immediate results focused, and then more of these cognitive sort of long-term goals. And so just, recognizing that space is a difficult psychological space. That's why we're in the situation, that we're in, partially is because, I think the stats that I saw, at least in the US, it's over 70% of people are overweight in some fashion. And so that's not because people want it to be that way. It's because it's very difficult in this sort of environment that we're put in. Like, this is just the natural way that it manifests. Like, I've been thinking a lot lately about, okay, we were talking about this before. Okay, we criticize ourselves, we get so upset with ourselves. like and we use these words, we're a failure, we fail at these things. Okay, if we zoom out from our own life and we realize, oh, like the large majority of people are struggling with the same thing. Like, have you encountered this perspective before? It may be a philosophical or spiritual tradition. So, like, we're all the same, like we think of ourselves as living these own individual experiences, but collectively, as a Homo sapiens, human beings, we're all having these similar sort of experiences. We're put into a certain environment. The food is not as good as it was, as far as the quality is much more mass produced. And then like this whole environment, the stress of modern life, it's not what our bodies are used to handling. And so we're in this environment that is also shaping us, and we're so influenced by it that if we have that perspective, realize, oh, like I'm a part of this society. The society is struggling like with this whole issue. It's like that's another way to have a little more, compassion for ourselves, and then say, okay, if I want to be different than this society, like what is happening, okay, I need to, you know, separate myself from it in a little bit. Like, okay, the consumption, the types of foods. I need to really focus the higher quality foods, opening up fasting space, getting good exercise. These are the things that you can do to push back against it. Does that answer the question? Those are the best thoughts that I have off the top of my mind. Good. Yeah, this is I don't have any, innate bias, against it as a rule. It's just a practical perspective. I gave it my best shot, and I said I've got to find something better than this, and that's how I landed with helping people with the fasting process and the healthy eating, and yeah. Okay, there I'm hitting an hour on the live stream. This was really nice. I'm really glad. I think I'll answer any other questions that people have while you're here. I'm very happy to have y'all with me here. I think I'll wrap things up though. I'm gonna be shooting a video today. The broad theme of that is like a video on trying to help people make it through the week. Some I commonly will talk to people and say, okay, like I'll fire myself up on Monday, and I'll really be going after it, and then my enthusiasm kind of wanes by Wednesday, and by Friday it's like the stress of the week, and then it's kind of things fall apart. And so many people experience a cycle like that. I'm going to try to film a video that is like, how do we try to balance that out in a way that keeps things moving forward better? So that's what I'll be doing today. Thanks so much for the interaction and thoughts. And let me know if is this something that I should do more in the future, just like open space. I think I might give it a whirl. Check out this fasting challenge video if you haven't watched it. Give me feedback on that. And I hope you have a great day. And I'll see you back here soon, I hope.